Medium up-tempo jazz might be the least covered subject on the internet. But if you can do it, like a lot of these things, you have an advantage. I'm Nate Smith, the 80/20 drummer. Do this. Hey guys, it's Nate from the 80/20 drummer. I want to welcome you to the big video of the week, and this week we're going back to tackle the subject of jazz. Last week I gave you the first installment in the series, how to really play jazz, and this week we're going to continue, and I'm playing the big kit this week because I want to talk about medium up-tempo, micro time, and the role of the left foot expanded a little bit, and specifically because there's a lot of crap on the interwebs about this, and the people who are teaching it in general, with a few exceptions, are not really teaching it the way the good players do. I want to start from the standpoint that you're approaching up-tempo swing from kind of a Ted Reed independence standpoint, where you've got an ostinato going on the right hand and the left foot, and you're trying to fill in the gaps with the hands. And this is certainly valuable, but just as with the first chapter, we're going to try to break you away from that. I'm going to take you through a 4-part sequence that deconstructs medium up-tempo jazz playing for you and sort of reassembles it so that you can do it more competently. The first part of this is the role of the left foot and the continuation of the conversation. The second part of this is counterpoint between the hands as a unit and the left foot. The third part of this is adding in linear playing and transitioning between linear playing and this more jazz-oriented double stop type of playing. And the fourth is the way we're going to practice this, as if we're editing a video by zooming ahead to a loop, zooming in, expanding, zooming ahead again, and in general just treating our own playing as if it's a recording. So let's jump right into example 1. This is going to sound a little bit like a James Brown type of beat when played at this tempo, but it's really just a reiteration of the same concept we saw last week, which is the conversation between the left hand and the other two limbs. So I'm going to start out by playing with all 4 quarters on the hi-hat with the right hand, and then very quickly I'm going to remove the right hand and fill in the gaps with the left foot on the hat. And then, as we did last week, I'm going to move the right hand to the ride cymbal. And then I'm going to start adding variation to the ride cymbal and playing those skip notes. And I'm going to jump right ahead to add the Hemiola variation that we covered at the end of last week, which was making a 16-beat phrase out of 6 plus 6 plus 4. You might already be able to invent these sort of Hemiola patterns right off the cuff, but I'm starting with the binary pattern and progressing to the Hemiola because I want to show you that any pattern can easily be varied using the Hemiola. Okay, I'm going to cover one more basic James Brownie type of thing in the conversation section before we get into the counterpoint. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. This type of practice is important to break us away from the hi-hat on 2 and 4, ride cymbal playing the same thing over and over again, kind of doldrums. And one reason I'm practicing it on the big kit with a dry ride cymbal is that the precision of those little notes lining up counts. It It's the way you're gonna sound like people like Eric Harland or Ari Honig, and that's what really makes those beats pop. This is a subject I address in great depth in Chapter 2 of the 80/20 Drummer, when I talk about being your own personal drum troupe and locking up with yourself. How would I practice this improvisationally? Simple. I wouldn't necessarily need to start with the right hand on the hats every time. I can start with the right hand on the ride cymbal, just playing quarters, and think melodies to myself in quarters at first, between and among the various three limbs, using the same type of idioms we've practiced. I'll get into it in a little greater depth later in the chapter, but I'm using this technique of looping one thing for 2 bars, then adding another thing, either going on to the next thing or expanding to include all 4 bars of something. So it's this kind of theme and variations thing that we see again and again, and that I did with the orchestration. Okay, now let's talk about the next sort of hip thing that modern jazz drummers do, which requires great time, and it also makes use of that great time. The archetypal track that I think of for this is from Robert Glasper's record Canvas in 2006, with Damian Reed playing drums, and you had these kind of amazing 16-note subdivisions and offbeats where he was ghosting the hat, which just really popped out. Now everybody does it. I mean, Damian wasn't the first, but how do you practice this? Simple. You just incorporate a couple of these idioms, and I'll show you right now. Okay, so you'll see me starting here with the hi-hat only playing on the downbeat on whole notes. And I'm ghosting quarters on the ride cymbal, and I'm playing an offbeat pattern on the snare drum. Once I have that dialed in, with the metronome clicking on every eighth, and really locked in, choose a tempo that's comfortable for you. If too fast sounds sloppy, obviously slow it down. But once I have that locked in, then I practice switching between playing the ride cymbal on all the quarters and playing the ride cymbal on the offbeats along with the left hand. The next phase is I start playing my hi-hat on 3 consecutive quarter notes, and I'm using this Tony Williams heel up bounce technique. Here's a secret about playing the hi-hat, by the way. If you practiced everything we've done so far heel up, it's going to feel pretty natural to you already. You just need to develop that muscle memory so that you can bounce the foot on consecutive quarters and still play it in time. Once it becomes a no-brainer and you're thinking of it as another limb in conversation, then you'll find it easy. And now I double stop the hands with the hi-hat playing quarters. This is where we finally get that hip Damian Reed effect. Naturally, you have to do this as a Hemiola as well. It's going to require you to do 5 or 6 consecutive quarters on the hats, so if you need to slow it down, feel free. Finally, for extra credit, you can land on the left hand on the open hat at the end of the phrase, which is like some deep Houston. Okay, that's really all there is to know about offbeat double stops, which is another big idiom people are using in modern jazz. Let's segue on to the next skill, which is linear playing interspersed with the double stops. Basically, the linear vocabulary is pretty simple, but a lot of it stems from Tony Williams. Basically, it's just a way to break up the time feel and, without changing the tempo, just dial the momentum back a little bit. I'm going to start you out with a very simple paradiddle type of structure that starts on the ride cymbal. I'll slow it down to show you the sticking. And of course, like everything else, I'm putting it through the Hemiola filter. Here's a look at how some other linear vocabulary can be used to break up the groove. Okay, so that's just dabbling in the linear stuff a little bit. You can check out any modern drummer like Brian Blade, Eric Harland, Ari Honig, or a lot of classic drummers like Tony Williams and Jack DeJohnette to get more ideas along these lines. Jack DeJohnette with the Keith Jarrett trio is a particularly good one. Let's move on to the final element, which is how do you practice this so that you're always sounding good but that you're never caught in a rut? And basically, I'm going to demonstrate that for you right now. You have the metronome going, and say you're starting with the basic idiom. You'll play that for a couple bars. And then, just as if you were editing a video, you'll expand your loop from 2 bars to 4. Then you can shift your loop over by 1 bar or 2 bars. Once you get comfortable with this framework, you can introduce new ideas as frequently or infrequently as you like. And this is one of the secrets of playing with continuity instead of hiccuping, is being able to dial in and change the length of that repeat loop so that if you get into trouble, you can always dial it back and just vamp on something you're comfortable with. This is something I cover in chapter 2 again, called the minimum effective beat. Okay, I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. We've bitten off quite a bit, but it's really important to me to make an effort at least to throw my arms around what is jazz drumming, because so many people out there are getting it wrong. Anyway, Nate Smith from the 80/20 Drummer. One love.